Hello! Okay, well, happy Father's Day. How many people out there are fathers? Raise your hands. How many people out there are married to a father? How many people have a father? Okay, good. Well, I saw some people who didn't raise their hands. I mean, some immaculate conception going on. But yeah, so just wanted to start with a quick quote. Now, have not used this before, so the bottom button is next. Nope, up button? Yes, there we go. Okay, so just a small quote. Men of true hearts and sincerity keep this world from extinction. Yeah, I read that. I was like, okay, wow, I like that. You know, you can put a W-O at the beginning for the ladies too. You know, but yeah, you know, I think a lot of times we look out at the world and we see all the problems and all the bad stuff, and we're like, okay, what's the point, right? But obviously, not everything's bad. There's some force pushing against it, right? And that's the men and women of true heart and sincerity. So don't ever think that your efforts go in vain, right? We're the ones that keep the world from extinction. Yeah, so normally when I you know, Pastor Mike or Pastor Adonia ask me to give a talk, which isn't very often, which is nice. You know, they have to do it once a week. I get to do it like every 6 months. It's a little bit easier. But usually I have an idea right off the top of my head what I want to talk about. And this time, nothing. Total blank, and like it was for like a week, total blank, and I was like, that's kind of strange. And then I was talking to my oldest daughter, Ali, about that, and she's like, well, isn't that Father's Day? You should talk about Father's Day. And right away, just a flood of ideas started coming. Oh my gosh, I got it, okay, right. And really all the ideas really related to not so much what we get on Father's Day, because I mean, I don't know, usually you get a tie. I got some shirts, and I got a bracelet from my younger daughter, you know. But it's really more about what can we as fathers, or people who want to be fathers, or people who know fathers, right, you know, what can that parental role give to your children on Father's Day? So yeah. Part of this also was inspired by what Pastor Adonia talked about last week. You know, she talked about keeping memories and making memories of your deep moments. And she gave the example of Jacob. You know who Jacob is? Anyone know who Jacob is? Okay. Anyone doesn't know who Jacob is? Raise your hands. All right. Yeah, this is Abraham's grandson. The divine principle says that he kind of led the model course of faith that made the foundation for Moses and Jesus. And Pastor Adonia talked about this experience he had where he was like, you know, his brother was going to try to kill him, so he ran away to his uncle, and he went to sleep by a river, and he had a spiritual experience. You know, he looked up and he saw angels climbing up and down this ladder, and he thought, oh my God, I literally found the gate between heaven and earth, and he put a little stone there, and he said, you know, no matter what happens, God, no matter what I'm going to go through, you know, if you got my back, God, I'm going to be with you always, you know. But if you read the Bible, it's actually really clear that, you know, he went through the next 21 years of being rejected and tricked by his uncle, and his brother's trying to kill him, and all this kind of crazy stuff. And he overcame it all. But while he was doing it, he had absolutely no clue what he was doing. There was no master plan. He didn't think, oh, I'm going to have to, you know, win the subjugation of my cane figure. And no, he had no clue what he was doing. But he did have two things that he got from his parents. First one is he had a faith in God, right? That's what that experience of Jacob's ladder was. Actually, if you read the Bible, before he had that spiritual experience, he always calls God the God of my father and my grandfather, the God of Abraham and Isaac. And then after that, it becomes my God, right? So that's one thing he had. And the second thing he had is he had the example given to him by his parents, right? Yeah, he was actually pretty close to his mother. His mother's the one who told him to get the birthright, and when he was running away to his uncle, it was his mother's brother, right? But it was also his dad, right? And he got his faith in God from his dad. And if it wasn't for those things, then, you know, again, he had no master plan. He was just confronted with situations. But because he received that from his parents, right? What do I do in these situations? Then he could be successful. So that's what we should try to do. So how do we do that? As dads, as people who know dads, who want to become dads, what do you give to your kids, right? So it's obviously not an exhaustive list, but here's 4 things, right? So the first one is to pray for them. This sermon is in some ways kind of a Father's Day gift to my dad. He's way in the back there. He's the one with the mask there. Yeah, really, I'll testify right now. I have 2 male role models in my life. One is Sam Young Moon, and one is Gary Fleischer, right? And my dad told me that sometime in the mid-'70s, he heard a talk from True Father where True Father said, you should pray for your children even before they're born. You should pray for them every day. And I'm old, but I'm not that old. I wasn't born in the 70s. Pray 4 years before you have each kid. 40 years for each. Pray 40 years for each kid. Okay, well, I'm past 40, so he got me. But yeah, and so my dad, since he heard that, has been praying every day for me, since before I was born. And I asked him, now that my kids are in their teens, and I was kind of worried, you worry about your kids. And I was like, well, Dad, when did you think that, I'd made it? I was going to be okay? And he said, Gelo, I still worry about you, People do stupid stuff in their 40s all the time, right? They buy a motorcycle and run off with their secretary or something. I don't have a secretary, so my wife is safe. But I thought, wow, yeah, it's a good point, right? So even from before I was born till now, in my middle age, my dad's been praying for me every single day. And this is something that you guys can do for your kids, even before they're born, right? Pray for them. The Bible says that the prayers of a righteous man do much. I will say, Pastor Mike sometimes talks about how he went through a really serious crisis of faith, right, where he just questioned everything. Same thing happened to me. I was about that close, and I'm being honest, that close to being an atheist. It's just, life works in weird ways, But somehow, and mom and dad couldn't really help me to go through what I was going through and all this other kind of stuff. But I'm very sure that their prayers helped me through that period of my life. So I couldn't actually find the quote where my dad's talking about with the pray for each child 40 years. I couldn't find that, but I found this quote. This quote's for the people who have kids who are kind of mean to them. So here we go. Even though you are always being deceived, people will become different with time. Know that the power of God is there and that God is not leaving you alone. If you have that much forgiveness and generosity and prayer, but still the other person doesn't repent, then don't worry about them. The spirit world will come down and chastise them. So, the spirit will get on them. Don't worry about it. But you can do your part, right? Pray for them every day, even if you feel nothing back, even if you just get deception or or just being ignored or whatever, right? Pray for them every single day. For those who don't have kids yet, start praying for them now. Start praying for your grandkids, right? It doesn't take very long, right? But it gives that energy, that intentionality towards your children that'll cover them with protection their whole life. So that's the first thing we can do, right? As fathers, or to be fathers, on Father's Day, pray for your kids. Pray for them every day. Second thing we can do is be an example. I guess outside of your wife, if you're a man who's married, your kids are the ones who know you the most because they're always watching. Even if you don't think they're watching, right? And so, just like, True Father was saying you should pray for your kids, I like this one a lot. As you walk, pray that you may be able to live according to God's words and that they may be transformed into flesh and blood and move within you, right? May the word of God become your fingers and your hands and it's real in your body, right? This should be our prayer as fathers every day. Because the more we can do that, the more we can put that into action in our life, right? That the words that we read become the body that we embody, then that becomes the example that our parents see. Our kids see about us as parents, right? I will say, the biggest challenges of my life, or the biggest things I had to take on in my life, I did look to my parents and my father for example, for that example, right? I don't know how many of you guys know, I'm married to someone who's Japanese, and we had a we'll call it a faith-based marriage. My wife did not speak English when we got married. I do not still speak Japanese, right? So how do we make that? We've been happily married 22 years, going on 23. How did I do that, right? Well, my parents, they were missionaries for, over 20 years, and when they got married, literally, I think the couple days after they got married, my dad became a missionary to Israel, and my mom was in Maine. So that was as far away as you could get, right? And this was Israel during the first Intifada. So you can ask my dad stories. He would about to board a bus, and he has this weird feeling, so he doesn't board, and then the bus blows up, and stuff like that, right? But and he was in Israel for 3 years, right? And this was like in the 70s, so no phone, the phone, you can give you like $100 for a long distance call. I don't know, is that right, Mom? Yeah. So my mom did not talk to my dad pretty much for 3 years, but my dad was very, very faithful. He wrote her letters. He made board games for her. What? Yeah, gifts. See, she's testifying. All this kind of stuff, nonstop for 3 years. And hearing about that from my mother, my dad didn't really talk about it, my mom did, I thought, okay, I can do this. I can take on a difficult situation because of the example I saw. Right? Now, that's an extreme situation. Right? You guys don't have to be quite extreme in your situations, right? But your kids will be looking at how you deal with people in business, how do you deal with your wife, right? How do you deal with people that you know, your friends, your responsibilities? And the more and more you pray, right, that the words of God become real in your body, the more that they'll look to you and in their questions about their life of faith, right, and their path in life. I hope that no one's feeling down about this. I heard this one person saying, "I'm a practicing Christian." That means I'm practicing, right? I'm practicing to be a Christian, right? The whole point of this prayer is not, "Oh God, I have now made it so that my blood and flesh is transformed into your word," right? No, this is, "Dear God, please let your words become real in me," right? Let's be practicing, right? And the more you can do it, and the sooner you can do it, the better it'll be. So that's the second thing we can do for our kids, right? Number 1, pray for them. Number 2, be an example for them. And number 3, be a companion to them, right? Yeah, it's interesting. I think when your kids are small, it's super easy to be a companion to them because they need you. They need you to wipe your butt. They need you to do everything for them, feed them, right? But the older they get, the more and more freedom they get. So I've got a 13-year-old now. She doesn't, doesn't need to hang around me. She's got friends. She's got a phone, right? But no matter from the, okay, I left school. I left my family when I was 18, and I went to the East Coast. My parents stayed here in Colorado. And I didn't come back until my mid-30s, and I was not a good son. I was not checking in with my dad every day, checking in with my mom, "How you doing?" Right? But they were checking in with me. Right? They were checking in with me. They texted me, they called me, and even I'm like, "Hey, Dad, I'm busy. No." They were a companion to me when I was not trying to be a companion to them. Right? They were initiating, even if I didn't really give back. And somehow, all 3 of us kids came to Denver. Right? So, when they're young, it's easy because what I noticed is that if your kids ask you to do something 2 or 3 times, pay attention. So my youngest daughter really loves Legos. I don't like Legos. I consider it kind of a waste, right? But she's like, "Dad, play with Legos with me." And I'm like, "No, I'm tired, honey." And after the 3rd time, I'm like, okay, this obviously means a lot to her. I will be a companion with her in making Legos. And she had a really good time with it, right? And I bet you that everyone here, right, there's something that you really wished your parents did that they didn't, or they did and you really appreciated it, right? So as dads or people, listen. If you hear your kids say something 2 or 3 times, it means a lot to them, right? Even if you don't think it means a lot, it means a lot to them. And when they're older and they're not asking you that kind of stuff, just keep initiating with them, right? Keep investing in them, keep loving them, keep taking care of them, keep reaching out to them, even if they don't answer for years. Sorry, Dad. But the fact is that when you do that, well, I'll leave this, let your father say that. We need companions in our life of faith. People without companions are lonely people. Those who have companions can support and protect each other. They can find ways to overcome challenges that arise in their life. Those with no companions have to resolve by themselves any problems that crop up. But this is truly a challenging task. Problems assail us from every direction, and we are unable to make it on our own. So it's kind of a downer ending, so I'll go back to this one here. Right? The fact is that a lot of times a dad is a rock of your children's life, right? You're the companion that can help them out in those challenges. But if you're not there for them, if you're not reaching out to them, they're not going to know to reach out to you when that moment comes. So always try to be for them a companion, right? That when the moment comes and they need you and they need your support, right, they'll go back to that rock. So, man, everyone's so quiet. I hope I'm doing okay. All right, pray for them. Be an example for them. Be a companion for them. And this one's for the ladies. The last one, praise your wife. Praise your wife, right? How will your boys know how to treat their women if they don't see it from you? How will your women know how a man should treat them if they don't see it from you, right? Praise your wife. I remember just 2 or 3 months ago, I was just with my dad in the car going someplace, and he just suddenly starts like talking about how great my mom is, like how beautiful she is after all these years, after 40 plus years of being married, and how dedicated she is to her mission, and always working hard, always investing, taking care of people like Natasha, just out of the blue, he just starts praising her, and I was like, wow, I will be honest, I never saw my parents fight growing up. Did they fight? What do you think? They were fighting, yes. My dad said they closed the door. Right? Your kids don't need to know how the sausage is made in that sense, right? And whatever, you can always, if you're doing that, you can stop doing that, right? Right? But always praise your wife. Right? Here's a quote from Father. Between husband and wife, would one say, "You serve me absolutely, no matter what"? Is that the ideal? What do you guys think? No! You agree with Father. What kind of relationship is ideal? The ideal is that both offer to serve the other all the time. Each should say to the other, "I respect you. You are higher than myself." That should be the case, right? So as much as possible, praise your wife and talk her up to your kids. Or if you're not parents yet, think about how to do that, right? Talk them up, right? Your parents are literally God to you, and no one wants to see God fight. Or more likely, God doesn't fight. So if you fight, you're making yourself separated from God, right? So those are the 4 things I have today to talk about. Right? Number 1, what can we do? Pray. Yeah. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. That's right. Praise your wife, even if it didn't come up there. That's right. Yeah. And I really hope that no one here is kind of down on this sermon. Everyone's kind of quiet. Maybe all the energy got sucked out with the bears and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, look at this as something aspirational, right? Be a practicing Christian. Practice, right? To do these things. And the more we can do them, right? The more we can embody them, the more we can pray for our children. That's the easy one, right? Be an example. Harder one. Be a companion. That just takes some consistency, right? And praising your wife. That just takes some effort. When you can do those things, right, then just like Jacob could look to his parents, his relationship with his parents, to know what to do in their life, your kids will look to you, right? And when they see you, they'll see God. And isn't that the thing that we should all want? So, okay. With that, let's say a prayer. Dear God, dear true parents, thank you so much for the examples you've given us in the past of righteous men, whether they be Jesus, whether they be true Father, whether they be our own parents. And if we were lacking those things, please always, Father, thank you so much that you've always been there for us. And please guide us that we can become better than what we received, and that we can do better than what we saw, and that we can build for you an ideal world. And it can be on our shoulders, and on our flesh, and in our blood. So attending Holy Mother Han, we pray with deep gratitude this day. Achu.